Hello everyone! Look at this. This is my mom and this is my dad. Who do you think I look like? But anyways, have you ever wondered why we look like our parents? Or even, why do some traits disappear in one generation but reappear in the next? The answer lies in genetics. Genetics is a study of how traits are passed from parents to offspring. And today, we'll explore how Gregor Mendel, the father of genetics, uncovered the rules of inheritance. Genetics is the study of heredity and variation. It explains how traits like eye color, hair type, and even genetic diseases are passed from one generation to the next. At the core of genetics are genes, which are segments of DNA that determine our traits. But before DNA was discovered, one scientist was already laying the foundation for modern genetics: Gregor Mendel. Gregor Mendel was an Austrian monk and scientist in the 1800s. While living in a monastery, he became fascinated with how traits are inherited. To study this, he performed controlled experiments on pea plants, carefully recording how traits were passed down across generations. But how did he keep track of all these informations? Mendel kept detailed notes in his diary, writing about invisible factors that determine traits. He didn't know about DNA, but he discovered that something, what we now call genes, controlled inheritance. His detailed records helped him develop two fundamental laws of genetics. But why did Mendel choose pea plants? Simple. They grow fast, have easily observable traits, and they can self-pollinate or cross-pollinate. This made them perfect for studying inheritance patterns. He focused on 7 traits, including seed color, shape, and plant height. Mendel used a process called hybridization, where he crossbred pea plants with different traits. Now let's take a closer look at one of Mendel's most famous experiments, his hybridization of green and yellow pea plants. Mendel started with 2 true breeding pea plants, one that always produced green seeds and one that always produced yellow seeds. He called this the parental generation. He cross-pollinated them, expecting a mix of green and yellow peas, but to his surprise, all of the offspring in the first filial generation, or F1, were yellow. What happened to the green trait? Did it disappear? Mendel didn't stop there. He took 2 of this F1 green plant and crossbred them. When the next generation, the F2 generation, grew, he saw something interesting: 3 yellow pea and 1 green pea. He counted the plants and found a consistent ratio, 3:1 ratio. This 3:1 pattern appeared every time. Mendel realized that the green trait had not disappeared, it was just hidden. Mendel discovered that some traits dominate over others. These are called the dominant traits. They appear if at least one dominant allele is present. Other traits are recessive, meaning they only appear if both alleles are recessive. Example: yellow seed color is dominant, while the green seed color is recessive. So a plant with a genotype of this will be yellow, but only this will be green. To explain this, let's introduce 2 important terms: genotype and phenotype. Phenotype is a trait that what we see, green or yellow. Genotype is the genetic makeup. It can be described as homozygous or heterozygous. When an organism inherits 2 identical alleles, we call it homozygous. It can be either homozygous dominant, both alleles are dominant, or homozygous recessive, which both alleles are recessive. But if an organism has 1 dominant and 1 recessive allele, we call it heterozygous, 1 dominant and 1 recessive. This can be predicted using a Punnett square, which is a tool that shows how genes are inherited. In Mendel's second experiment, when he crossed the F1 plants, which had a hidden green allele and a genotype of this, the F2 generations had these combinations. That's why the phenotypic ratio is 3:1. while the genotypic ratio is 1:2:1. 1 homozygous dominant, 2 heterozygous, and 1 homozygous recessive. Now, let's go with the Mendel's law. Mendel's first law, the law of segregation. It states that each parent has 2 alleles for a gene, but they pass only one to their offspring. This happens during gamete formation, when sperm and egg cells are made. Example, if a parent has a genotype of this, it can pass either this or this to the next generation. This explains why some recessive traits like yellow SIDS can reappear even if they were hidden in the previous generation. Mendel didn't just stop with one trait. He wanted to see if different traits like SID color and SID shape were inherited together or separately, and so he performed a dihybrid cross, where he bred plants that had both round and yellow SIDS with plants that had wrinkled and green SIDS. In the F1 generation, all plants had round yellow SIDS. But when he crossed these F1 plants, the F2 generation produced a 9:3:3:1 ratio. The combinations in the F2 generation were this. If we cross a plant with F1 generations, we get a variety of combinations. Mendel found a predictable 9:3:3:1 ratio in the offspring, showing that the different traits do not influence each other. From this, Mendel formulated the law of independent assortment, which states that genes for different traits are inherited separately. This means that whether a seed is round or wrinkled does not affect its color. This trait assorts independently. Mendelian principles apply to humans too. Some traits follow simple dominant recessive pattern, such as having a dimples, widow's peak, or even earlobe attachment. So understanding genetics helps us trace family traits, predict genetic disorders, and even improve agriculture by selecting the best crops. To summarize, Gregor Mendel discovered 2 fundamental principles of inheritance: the law of segregation that states each parent passes only one allele to their offspring, and the law of independent assortment, which states genes for different traits assort independently. Although later discoveries showed that some traits follow more complex inheritance patterns, Mendel's work remains the foundation of modern genetics. Mendel's discovery changed the way we understand life. By studying inheritance, we can explore our own genetic traits, predict health risks, and improve farming techniques. So next time you look in the mirror, remember you are a living example of Mendelian genetics.